The first time she saw him bleed, she didn't move. Not because she was cruel. Not because she didn't care. But because in that moment, standing in the marble hallway of the Santiago estate with rain hammering against bulletproof glass and his blood pooling on white Italian tile, she understood something that would change both their lives forever. His silence toward her had never been about hatred at all. It had been about survival. 3 men lay unconscious around him. His white shirt was torn, crimson spreading across his ribs. His eyes, those impossibly dark eyes that had looked through her for 6 months like she was made of air, finally met hers. Really met hers. And in them she saw something she never expected to see in a man who controlled half the city's underworld. Fear. Not of dying. Not of his enemies. Fear of being seen. "Go," he whispered. The first word he'd ever spoken directly to her. His voice was rough, breaking. "Please. Just go." But she didn't go. Before we continue, if stories like this soften your heart even a little, please like this video. Drop a comment and tell me what you feel already, I read them all. And don't forget to subscribe, so you don't miss stories that feel real, quiet, and unforgettable. Let's continue. The Santiago estate didn't sleep. Even at 2 a.m., lights glowed in distant windows. Security cameras swept the grounds in silent rotations. The fountain in the east garden ran continuously, its water catching moonlight like scattered diamonds. And in the servants' quarters, a wing that was nicer than most Manhattan apartments, Nia Johnson sat on her narrow bed, fighting the urge to quit. Not because the work was hard. She'd worked harder jobs for less pay. Not because of the hours, though they were long. And not because of the rumors that swirled through every conversation among the staff, whispers about Lorenzo Santiago, about the empire he'd inherited at 23, about the things he'd done to keep it. She wanted to quit because of the silence. 6 months she'd worked here as part of the housekeeping staff. 6 months of impeccable service, of memorizing schedules and preferences, of learning which rooms to clean when and how. 6 months of occasionally passing him in hallways, of standing aside when he entered a room, of existing in the same spaces as a man who looked through her like she was a ghost. She tried speaking to him exactly once, 3 weeks into her employment. A simple "Good morning, Mr. Santiago," as he passed her in the west corridor. He'd frozen, she remembered that part vividly, frozen mid-step like she'd physically struck him. Then he'd turned and walked away, and the next day his head of security had reminded her that staff were not to address Mr. Santiago directly. "He prefers it that way," Marcus had said, not unkindly. Marcus was decent, one of the few people here who treated the staff like humans. With certain employees, communication goes through supervisors. Nia wasn't stupid. She knew what certain employees meant. She'd noticed she was the only black woman on the housekeeping staff, that the others were carefully diverse, Latina, Asian, Eastern European, but that particular shade of melanin was conspicuously absent everywhere except the grounds crew, and they never entered the house. She should have been angry. Part of her was. But mostly she was just tired. Tired of being invisible in a house full of people. Tired of the weight of silence. Tomorrow, she decided, pulling her grandmother's quilt around her shoulders. Tomorrow she'd give her 2 weeks' notice. She'd find something else. Something where she at least felt human. The decision should have brought relief. Instead, it sat in her chest like a stone. Lorenzo Santiago was not sleeping either. He stood in his study, all dark wood and darker secrets, staring at the security monitor that showed the east corridor. Not for any security reason. Not because there was a threat. Because 3 minutes ago, she had walked past camera 7. Nia Johnson. Employee ID 847. Age 26. Brooklyn native. Bachelor's degree in social work from CUNY, graduated with honors despite working 2 jobs. No criminal record. No family except an elderly grandmother in a nursing home in Queens, whose bills were mysteriously always paid on time through an anonymous benefactor. He wasn't supposed to know these things. He definitely wasn't supposed to have memorized them. Lorenzo pressed his palms against the mahogany desk and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his lungs for months. Years. Maybe his entire adult life. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. The knowing. The noticing. The way his chest tightened when she hummed while she worked, old gospel songs, he thought, though he'd never been inside a church that would know them. The way she moved through his house like water, efficient and graceful and completely unaware that he rearranged his entire morning schedule just to catch 30 seconds of her passing through the hallway. It was pathological. It was dangerous. It was the one thing he'd sworn he'd never allow. "You're being an idiot," he muttered to the empty room. The room, wisely, didn't answer. He'd built his entire existence on control. Every action calculated. Every word measured. The silence toward black employees wasn't personal. He wanted to tell her that, had wanted to tell her that from the first day she'd looked at him with those clear, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through his expensive suits and family name to the broken thing underneath. But he couldn't tell her. Because telling her would require explaining. And explaining would require opening a door he'd sealed shut the night his mother died in his arms, her blood warm on his hands, her last words a plea he'd spent 12 years trying to honor. "Don't let them make you forget who you are." Too late, Mama. Too late. He'd forgotten everything except how to survive. And survival meant distance. Meant rules that made no sense to anyone but him. Meant treating people like her, people who reminded him of everything he'd lost, as if they didn't exist. It was simpler that way. Safer. Except tonight, for the first time in 6 months, he'd seen something new in her face as she'd passed that camera. Not hurt anymore. Not confusion. Resolution. She was leaving. He knew it the way he knew when a deal was about to go bad, when loyalty was about to fracture. Some things you just felt in your bones. And the thought of her walking out of his house, out of his life, made him want to put his fist through the antique desk his grandfather had shipped from Sicily. Let her go, he told himself. It's better this way. But his hands were shaking, and Lorenzo Santiago's hands never shook. Dawn came soft and gray, the kind of morning where the world felt suspended between darkness and light. Nia had slept poorly, her dreams full of hallways that stretched forever and doors that wouldn't open. She dressed carefully in her standard uniform, black pants, white blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Professional. Invisible. The way she'd learned to make herself over 6 months of calculated rejection. Today would be different, though. Today she'd draft her resignation letter during lunch. She'd be courteous, professional. Give proper notice. Leave without burning bridges. The decision sat easier in the daylight. She was heading toward the East Wing, the family quarters that needed early morning service before Mr. Santiago began his day, when she heard it. Raised voices. Male. Angry. Nia froze. Staff weren't supposed to hear family business. The smart thing would be to turn around, to wait until whatever was happening had passed. But something in those voices made her skin prickle. Something wrong. She moved closer, her soft-soled shoes silent on the marble. The voices were coming from the gallery, a long hallway lined with family portraits, high windows overlooking the grounds. Done protecting you. That was Alessandro, Lorenzo's uncle. She recognized his voice from staff meetings, all false warmth and hidden venom. You think you can run this family at 35? You're a boy playing at being a man. This conversation is over. Lorenzo's voice, cold as winter. Get out of my house. Your house. Alessandro laughed, and it was an ugly sound. Your father built this empire. Your grandfather before him. You're just the latest Santiago to sit in the big chair, and you're running us into the ground with your... The sound that came next made Nia's blood freeze. A crash. Breaking glass. Then silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. She should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she stepped around the corner. The scene printed itself in her memory like a photograph. 3 men, Alessandro's personal security, standing in attack positions. Lorenzo against the far wall, blood already blooming across his white shirt. Broken mirror glass scattered like deadly snow. And Alessandro with something in his hand that caught the morning light. A knife. Family businesses, Alessandro said softly, require family loyalty. You've forgotten that, nephew. Time moved strangely then. Nia saw Lorenzo's eyes sweep the room, calculating odds. Saw him notice her. Saw something flash across his face, surprise, horror, something she couldn't name. Run, he said. To her. The second word he'd ever spoken directly to her. Alessandro's head snapped around. Ania, Brooklyn-born, grandmother-raised, survivor of worse things than rich men and their violent games, pulled the fire alarm. The sound was immediate and deafening. Sprinklers engaged. Emergency lights. The entire house erupting into coordinated chaos. Alessandro's men hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough. Lorenzo moved like violence itself, 3 strikes, precise and brutal. 2 men dropped. The third got a hand on him, but then Marcus was there with more security, real security, the kind loyal to Lorenzo and not to ambitious uncles who thought murder was a reasonable career advancement strategy. Through it all, Nia stood frozen in her growing puddle of sprinkler water, watching a man who'd never acknowledged her existence fight for his life. And when it was over, Alessandro and his men restrained, hauled away by security that would likely deliver them somewhere much worse than any police station, Lorenzo turned to her. Really turned to her. Looked at her. Saw her. You didn't run, he said, and his voice was different now. Broken open. Raw. No, she agreed. You should have run. Probably. Water fell between them like rain, turning the gallery into something from a dream. Or a nightmare. The line was getting blurry. Lorenzo took a step toward her, then stopped. His hand was pressed against his ribs, blood seeping between his fingers. Why? It was the question she'd wanted to ask him for 6 months. Why the silence? Why the distance? Why her? But she understood now that why was complicated. That it had layers. That maybe some silences were about protection rather than cruelty. You're hurt, she said instead of answering. I've been worse. That's not actually comforting. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. It transformed his face, made him look younger, more human, less like the marble statue he usually resembled. The medical team is on the way, he said. Marcus will make sure you're. I'm not leaving. The word surprised them both. Lorenzo stared at her, water dripping from his dark hair, blood and water mixing on expensive marble. You don't understand what you're saying. What you just witnessed. I understand perfectly. And somehow, she did. Understood that this moment was a crossroads. That whatever happened next would define everything that came after. I'm not leaving. Something shifted in his eyes. Something that might have been hope if hope were sharper, more dangerous. You should quit, he said softly. Walk away from this house, from me, from all of it. I'll make sure you get 6 months' salary. Reference letters. Whatever you need. But staying here, he shook his head. It's not safe. Because of what just happened. Because of me. The honesty of it hit her like a physical thing. She understood then that his silence hadn't been about making her invisible. It had been about keeping her safe from being seen. What if I don't want safe, she heard herself say. And Lorenzo Santiago, man of marble and calculated distance, looked at her like she'd just offered him something precious and impossible. "Then God help us both," he whispered. The next few weeks existed in a strange space between before and after. Officially, nothing changed. Nia still worked housekeeping. Lorenzo still ran his empire from his study, from the dining room where deals were made over wine older than she was, from the armored cars that took him to meetings she preferred not to imagine. But everything had changed. He didn't speak to her directly, not yet, but the silence was different now. It had texture. Weight. It felt like anticipation. She'd catch him watching her sometimes when he thought she didn't notice. In the reflection of windows. Through doorways. His eyes tracking her movements through his house like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. She started watching back. That's how she learned he took his coffee black but only afternoon. That he had nightmares, she could hear them sometimes when she cleaned the hallway outside his bedroom, his voice breaking through dreams she hoped she'd never have to understand. That he read poetry in Italian, the old books with cracked spines that he kept hidden behind business journals. That he was left-handed but taught himself to fight right-handed, some childhood adaptation she could only guess at. That sometimes, late at night when he thought the house was asleep, he stood in the gallery where she'd pulled the fire alarm and just stared at the spot where she'd refused to run. It was Marcus who finally said something. "He's doing it again," the head of security said one afternoon, leaning against the kitchen counter while Nia inventoried linens. "Doing what?" "Rearranging his schedule to be in the same rooms as you. It's getting obvious." Nia kept her eyes on her clipboard. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Listen, I've known Lorenzo since he was 16. Watched his father die, watched what that did to him. Watched him build walls so high nothing could get over them." He paused. "You're getting over them." "I'm not trying to." "I know. That's why it's working." Marcus straightened up. "Just be careful. Not because he'd hurt you, but because you might hurt each other trying to figure out how not to." It happened on a Tuesday. Nia was cleaning the library, her favorite room in the house, all leather and wooden books that smelled like history, when she realized she wasn't alone. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, wearing casual clothes for once. Dark jeans. A soft gray sweater that made him look less like a crime lord and more like a man who might read poetry in Italian and mean it. "I'm almost finished," she said, reaching for her supplies. "Don't." The word came quickly. "Please. Don't go." She turned to look at him fully. Really look at him. He looked tired. Not physically, that was there too, but soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long. "Okay," she said simply. He crossed to one of the leather chairs, but didn't sit. Just stood behind it, hands gripping the back like he needed something to hold on to. "I need to explain," he said. "About the silence. About why he stopped, frustrated. I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Talking. To you. About things that matter." Nia set down her supplies and moved to sit in the chair across from his. "You're doing fine so far." "No, I'm not." But he smiled slightly. That small smile that transformed him. "My mother," he started, then stopped. Started again. "My mother was the kindest person I've ever known. She was black, from Louisiana originally. Gospel singer before she met my father. She used to hum while she cooked, these old spirituals that made the kitchen feel like church." Nia's heart clenched. "Used to?" "She was killed when I was 23. Shot in a targeted attack meant to hurt my father. Collateral damage in a war she never asked to be part of." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the pain underneath. "She died in my arms. And the last thing she said was, "Don't let them make you forget who you are." Lorenzo. I've spent 12 years trying to honor that. Trying to remember. But this life, he gestured vaguely at the house, the world beyond it. It doesn't allow for memory. For softness. For being reminded of everything you've lost. So I made rules. Distance. I told myself it was about business, about security, about maintaining proper lines. But the truth is I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't hear gospel humming in my house without remembering her. I couldn't see someone with her grace, her strength, without feeling like I was betraying her memory by letting this world touch them. Understanding bloomed in Nia's chest, painful and beautiful at once. You weren't protecting yourself. No. He finally met her eyes. I was protecting you. All of you. From becoming targets because I noticed. Because I cared. Because I let myself remember that I'm not just this. He touched his chest. This calculated thing my father tried to make me. I'm also her son. And she would hate what I've become. Nia stood slowly, crossed the distance between them. Lorenzo stiffened but didn't move away. You know what I think, she said softly. What? I think she'd be proud that you still remember. That you still hurt. That you haven't let this world make you completely numb. She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. And I think she'd forgive you for trying to protect yourself in the only way you knew how. Lorenzo looked down at their joined hands like he'd never seen such a thing before. I've wanted to talk to you since the day you started. Did you know that? You smiled at Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, you remember, the older woman who manages supplies, and it was so genuine, so kind, and I thought I can't let her see me. Can't let her become another person I care about who gets hurt because of my name. You can't control everything. I know. Believe me, I know. He turned his hand so their palms pressed together. But I can control this. How I treat you. Whether I let you see who I really am beneath all this. He gestured at himself with his free hand. I want to try. If you'll let me. Nia felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening to a room she'd kept locked. What exactly are you asking? To know you. Really know you. Not as employee 847, but as Nia. The woman who pulled a fire alarm instead of running. Who faces down violence without flinching. Who hums gospel songs when she thinks no one is listening. You heard that? I've heard everything. Every word, every song, every moment. I've just been too much of a coward to admit I was listening. That's a lot of admission for one conversation. I have 12 years of silence to make up for. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Can I start now? And Nia, who'd spent 6 months feeling invisible, who'd decided just weeks ago to walk away from this strange house and its stranger silences, found herself saying, yes. They were careful at first. Conversations happened in spaces that felt safe. The library became their sanctuary. Late evenings after the house had quieted, they'd find themselves there, him in his leather chair, her curled in the window seat, talking about everything and nothing. She learned he had a degree in philosophy from Oxford that he never used. That he played piano but only when he thought he was alone. That he'd wanted to be a teacher before his father died and the family business swallowed his life. He learned she'd started college wanting to be a doctor but switched to social work after volunteering at her grandmother's nursing home. That she wrote poetry in notebooks she kept hidden under her mattress. That she'd never been in love before because every relationship felt like someone trying to fit her into a shape she didn't match. What shape do you match? He asked one night, rain pattering against the windows. She considered this. I don't know yet. I think maybe I'm still figuring out my edges. I like your edges. You don't know them yet. Then let me learn them. He set down his coffee cup. I want to know everything, Nia. The parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden. The poetry and the prayers and the things that wake you up at 3 a.m. All of it. That's a lot of wanting. I know. I'm sorry. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm not good at halfway. Never have been. So if this is too much, too fast, tell me and I'll. Lorenzo. She waited until he looked at her. It's not too much. The relief in his face was almost painful to see. The staff noticed, of course. Mr. Santiago smiled at you in the hallway, Maria whispered one morning during breakfast. Actually smiled. Like with teeth and everything. He was being polite, Nia said, focusing very hard on her oatmeal. Polite. Maria snorted. Girl, that man hasn't been polite a day in his life. He's efficient. He's cold. He's perfect. But he's not polite. She leaned closer. What's happening? Nothing. Nia. Nothing that I'm ready to talk about yet. Maria studied her face, then nodded slowly. Okay. But when you are ready? I'm here. But not everyone was happy about the shift. Alessandro was gone, arrested on charges that would keep him behind bars for years, but he'd had allies. People who thought Lorenzo was too young, too soft, not enough like his father. People who'd noticed the way the rules were bending around one particular employee. You're making yourself vulnerable, Gabriella warned. She was Lorenzo's cousin, one of the few family members he actually trusted. They were in his study, discussing quarterly reports that Nia wasn't supposed to know about but could hear from the hallway. The board is talking. They see you rearranging meetings, see you spending hours in the library when you should be at the docks. The business is fine. The business is perfect. That's not the issue. Papers rustled. The issue is that you're letting yourself care about someone in a world where caring is a liability. I'm aware of the risks. Are you? Really? Because I remember what happened to your mother. You remember. And this girl. Her name is Nia. Fine. Nia. She works for you. Lives in your house. Walks around with a target on her back just by being associated with you, and she doesn't even know it yet. That's not. It is true. You know it is. So either you protect her by ending this now, or you protect her by making her part of this world in a way that gives her armor. There's no middle ground, Lorenzo. There never is with us. Silence. Then, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you stop pretending this is just about conversations in libraries. Either she matters or she doesn't. And if she matters, Gabriella paused. Then you need to decide what that means. Lorenzo told her about the conversation 3 days later. They were in the garden this time, the East Garden with its fountain and roses that bloomed even in November. Nia had never been here at night, staff didn't come to the gardens after dark, but he'd asked her to meet him, and something in his voice made her say yes. He looked different in the moonlight. Softer. More real. I need to tell you something, he said, and her heart sank. Okay. There are people who don't like that I've been spending time with you. Family members, business associates. People who think it makes me weak. I see. No, you don't. He turned to face her fully. Because I don't care what they think. I've never cared what they think. But I do care about keeping you safe. I can take care of myself. I know you can. You've proven that. But there's a difference between being capable and being protected. He took a breath. Gabriella said there's no middle ground with us. With this family, this life. Either you're in or you're out. Either you're protected or you're a target. And I need to know, his voice caught. I need to know if you want in. Nia felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. What exactly does in mean? It means people know you matter to me. It means you have the full weight of the Santiago name behind you. It means, he moved closer. It means I stop pretending I can keep you at arm's length. Stop pretending I haven't been completely undone by you since the day you pulled that fire alarm and refused to be invisible anymore. Lorenzo. I know it's crazy. I know we've only been really talking for a few weeks. But I've been watching you for months, learning you, wanting you, and I'm tired of halfway. I'm tired of pretending I'm the kind of man who can walk away from something that feels like this. Like what? He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered against her cheek. Like coming home. Like finding something I didn't know I'd been looking for. Like, he laughed softly, self-deprecating. My mother used to say love was God's way of reminding us we're human. I never understood what she meant until you. Nia felt tears sting her eyes. This is terrifying. I know. Your world is dangerous. I know. I could get hurt. Not while I'm breathing. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I will protect you with everything I am, everything I have. But I need you to choose this. Choose me. I won't make that decision for you. She thought about 6 months of silence. About the moment in the gallery when she could have run but didn't. About late nights in libraries and conversations that felt like discovering a new language. About the way he looked at her like she was both treasure and salvation. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens? Everything changes. You stop being an employee. You become, he searched for the word. Mine. Under my protection. Part of my world in a way that can't be undone. That's very possessive. I'm a very possessive man. He smiled slightly. But only with things that matter. And Nia, his voice dropped. You matter. She should have been terrified. Should have said no, walked away, chosen the safe path. But safety had never been her goal. Survival had. And somehow, impossibly, surviving felt like saying yes to this man who'd learned to see her, really see her, despite every wall he'd built to keep himself from caring. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Yes. I choose this. I choose you. Lorenzo closed his eyes like she'd given him something sacred. When he opened them again, they were bright with something that might have been tears. Thank you, he said quietly. Then he kissed her, soft and careful and full of 12 years of silence finally breaking open into sound. The transition was jarring. One day she was Nia Johnson, housekeeping staff. The next she was Nia Johnson, under the protection of Lorenzo Santiago, and the house shifted around her like a kaleidoscope finding a new pattern. Her room in the servants' quarters was replaced with a suite in the family wing. Maria cried when she helped her pack, happy tears and worried ones mixed together. You're sure about this? She asked. No, Nia admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. The staff treated her differently now. Not badly, Lorenzo wouldn't have allowed that, but carefully. Like she'd become something fragile and powerful at once. She hated it. I'm still me, she told Mrs. Chen in the kitchen one morning. The older woman smiled sadly. No, dear. You were you. Now you're his. There's a difference. I don't want there to be. Wanting doesn't change truth. Lorenzo felt her pulling away and it terrified him. Talk to me, he said one night. They were in his study, her study now too, he'd insisted, and she'd been quiet for an hour, pretending to read. About what? About whatever is making you look at me like I'm a stranger. She set down her book. Everything's different. I know. I'm sorry. I should have. It's not your fault. It's just, she struggled for words. I used to be invisible. Now I'm hypervisible. Every move I make, people notice. Judge. Wonder if I'm worth the protection, worth the risk. And I don't, her voice broke. I don't know how to be that person. The one who matters enough to change everything. Lorenzo crossed to her, knelt in front of her chair so they were eye level. You want to know a secret? What? I don't know how to be the person who lets someone matter this much. We're both learning. What if I mess it up? Then we mess it up together. He took her hands. Nia, I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be you. The woman who pulls fire alarms and refuses to run. Who hums gospel songs and writes secret poetry. Who called me out in the library for being a coward about my own feelings. That's who I chose. That's who I want. Even if she doesn't fit in your world? Especially then. This world, he gestured vaguely. It's cold. Calculated. Full of people playing roles. You're real. You're warm. You're everything this place isn't, and that's exactly why you belong here. To remind me that there's more to life than power and control and maintaining distance. Tears slid down her cheeks. I'm scared. Good. So am I. But we're scared together, and that makes all the difference. It came 3 weeks later, at a family dinner she'd been dreading. The Santiago family gathered monthly, an old tradition that Lorenzo maintained despite hating it. Business was discussed. Alliances were reinforced. And now, for the first time, he was bringing Nia. You don't have to do this yet, he'd said that morning. Yes, I do. If I'm part of your world, I need to be in all of it. Not just the safe parts. He'd kissed her forehead. You're braver than I am. The dining room was intimidating. Crystal chandeliers. Silk wallpaper. A table that could seat 30 but tonight held 15 family members, each one studying her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. Gabriella was there, offering a small smile of support. Marcus stood by the door, security but also ally. And Lorenzo sat at the head of the table with Nia beside him, his hand finding hers under the table. Everyone, Lorenzo said clearly, this is Nia Johnson. She's under my protection, and she matters to me. I expect her to be treated as family. Silence. Then his grandmother, a tiny woman in her 90s with eyes sharp as blades, spoke from the other end of the table. Tell me, child, why should we trust you? It was a test. Nia knew it immediately. You shouldn't, she said clearly. Trust is earned, not given. I haven't earned yours yet. But I will. Bold words. I've learned from a bold man. Someone chuckled. Lorenzo's hand tightened on hers. And what do you bring to this family? Another cousin asked. What value? Nia could feel Lorenzo tensing, ready to defend her. She squeezed his hand, a silent message, I've got this. I bring perspective, she said. A different way of seeing the world. And maybe, she looked directly at Lorenzo's grandmother. I bring him someone who sees the man, not just the legacy. Someone who reminds him that power isn't the same as worth. The old woman studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You'll do. Welcome to the family, child. May you survive us. It wasn't exactly a warm welcome. But it was acceptance, and that was enough. That night, back in Lorenzo's study, he pulled her into his arms. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I was terrified. You were magnificent and terrified. The best combination. She laughed despite herself. Your grandmother is intense. She liked you. Trust me, you'd know if she didn't. He pulled back to look at her. Thank you for doing that. For facing them. We're in this together, remember? Together. He said the word like a prayer. God, I love the sound of that. Lorenzo. I know we haven't said it yet. The big thing. But I need you to know, he cupped her face in his hands. I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. Have been probably since you pulled that fire alarm. Maybe before. And I don't need you to say it back right now, but I needed you to know. Nia felt something settle in her chest, warm and right and terrifying. What if I wanted to say it back? His breath caught. Do you? I love you. The words felt like jumping off a cliff and finding wings. I love you in ways I don't fully understand yet. In ways that scare me and excite me and make me feel more alive than I've ever felt. So yes, Lorenzo Santiago. I love you. He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. And outside the study door, Marcus smiled and walked away, giving them privacy for this moment that was theirs alone. The next few months were a careful dance of integration. Nia learned the family business, not the violent parts. Lorenzo kept her far from those, but the legitimate operations. Real estate. Shipping. Import-export. She had a good head for numbers, it turned out, and an even better head for reading people. You should sit in on negotiations, Gabriella suggested one afternoon. They'd become unlikely friends, Gabriella teaching Nia the subtle arts of family politics. I don't know anything about negotiating. You know people. That's 90% of it. So she started attending meetings, sitting quietly at first, just observing. Then occasionally offering insights that made hardened businessmen reconsider their positions. How did you know Mercado was bluffing? Lorenzo asked after one particularly tense negotiation. He kept touching his watch. Nervous habit. He needed the deal more than he wanted us to know. Lorenzo laughed, the sound warm and real. You're terrifying. I love it. But not every transition was smooth. There were people who resented her presence. Whispers that she'd slept her way into power, that she was using Lorenzo, that she'd turn on him eventually. The words hurt, but she learned to wear armor. Let them talk, Marcus advised. Actions matter more than words in this world. So she let her actions speak. She was kind to the staff, remembering what it felt like to be invisible. She supported Lorenzo's business decisions publicly and challenged them privately when she disagreed. She attended charity events and remembered names and listened more than she spoke. Slowly, grudgingly, the family began to truly accept her. The real test came 6 months after that first family dinner. Lorenzo had to travel, business in Italy that couldn't be handled remotely. He'd be gone for 2 weeks, and he hated leaving her. Come with me, he said the night before his flight. I can't. Your grandmother's birthday is this weekend. Someone from this side of the family should be there. Nia. I'll be fine. Marcus will be here. Gabriella will keep me company. And, she smiled. I'm not the same woman who pulled that fire alarm. I'm stronger now. You were always strong. Maybe. But now I know it. He kissed her goodbye at dawn, holding her like he could memorize the feel of her through touch alone. 2 weeks. 14 days. I can count. Nia. I love you. I'll be here when you get back. Now go before you miss your flight. The trouble started 3 days later. Nia woke to raised voices in the hallway. She pulled on a robe and opened her door to find Marcus arguing with someone she didn't recognize. Not authorized to be here, Marcus was saying. I'm family. I don't need authorization. Nia stepped into the hallway. What's going on? The stranger turned to look at her. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the Santiago dark hair and sharp features. You must be the girlfriend. I'm Dante, Lorenzo's cousin. We haven't met. Something in his smile made her skin crawl. Marcus? She asked quietly. Dante lives in Italy. He wasn't invited here. I don't need invitations to my family's house. Dante moved closer. I just wanted to meet the woman who's captured my cousin's attention so completely. She must be very special. Mr. Santiago will be informed of your arrival, Marcus said firmly. I'm sure he will be. Dante's eyes never left Nia. We'll talk more later, I'm sure. They didn't talk later. Dante left before noon, but his presence lingered like smoke. Nia tried to shake the uneasy feeling, but couldn't. That night, she called Lorenzo. He was here? Lorenzo's voice was tight. Dante? Marcus handled it. He left. But Lorenzo, something felt wrong. Dante is, he paused. Complicated. He and I had a falling out years ago. He shouldn't be in New York, much less in my house. What kind of falling out? The kind where he thought he should be running the family instead of me. And he wasn't quiet about those thoughts. Nia's stomach sank. Is he dangerous? To me? Probably. To you? Lorenzo's voice went cold. I'm getting on a plane. I'll be home tomorrow. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Dante doesn't make social calls, Nia. If he came to see you, it was to send a message. What message? That he knows what matters to me. And that makes you a target. Lorenzo came home to controlled chaos. Marcus had tripled security. Gabriella had moved into the house for a visit. And Nia was in the study, apparently reading but actually just staring at the same page she'd been staring at for an hour. Hey, Lorenzo said softly from the doorway. She looked up, and the relief in her face nearly broke him. You came back. Of course I came back. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. I will always come back to you. She buried her face in his chest. I was so scared. Not for me, Marcus wouldn't have let anything happen. But for you, rushing back, putting yourself at risk. Nia. He tilted her chin up. You are my risk. My choice. My everything. Dante wants to make you a weakness. I want to prove you're my strength. There's a difference. How? By not hiding you. By not letting fear make decisions. He took a breath. Marry me. She froze. What? Marry me. Not someday, not eventually. Soon. Next month. Tomorrow if you'll have me. Because if Dante or anyone else thinks they can use you against me, they need to know you're not just under my protection. You're my wife. My partner. And touching you means going to war with the entire Santiago family. She laughed shakily. That's the most pragmatic proposal I've ever heard. It's not just pragmatic. He knelt, right there in the study, and took her hands. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up next to you and argue about business deals and teach you Italian phrases so you can surprise my grandmother. I want you to keep pulling fire alarms when I'm being stupid and writing poetry that you think I don't see but I absolutely do, and it's beautiful. I want everything, Nia. Not because of Dante, not because of fear, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Tears streamed down her face. You really mean that? Every word. So, he pulled out a small box he'd been carrying in his pocket since buying it 3 months ago in a moment of hope and fear. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, antique, with a single perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Not flashy. Elegant. Timeless. It was my mother's, he said quietly. My father gave it to her when they got engaged. She wore it every day until his voice caught. I think she'd want you to have it. I know I want you to have it. Nia looked at the ring, then at him, then at the ring again. Thought about 6 months of silence and 6 months of sound. Thought about fire alarms and libraries and learning to be brave together. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony in the East Garden. It should have been bigger, the Santiago family expected spectacle, but Lorenzo gave Nia what she wanted, intimate, meaningful, real. Just family and close friends, gospel music that made his grandmother cry, vows they wrote themselves that promised honesty and partnership and choosing each other every single day. Nia wore her grandmother's pearls and a dress that was simple and perfect. Lorenzo wore a suit but no tie, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen him in years. When he kissed her, making it official, Marcus whistled and Gabriella threw rose petals and the garden felt like exactly what it was, a place where something new was beginning. But marriage didn't solve everything. Dante was still out there, still making moves. Other families circled, smelling what they thought was weakness in Lorenzo's obvious love for his wife. They don't understand, Gabriella said one evening. She and Nia had become close, sisters by choice if not by blood. They think love makes you vulnerable. They don't realize it gives you something to protect. Something worth fighting for. Is that what Lorenzo's doing? Fighting? Every day. Gabriella topped off their wine. But differently now. Smarter. He's not just maintaining power, he's building something that can last. Something good, even in this ugly world. And that's because of you. I haven't done anything. You've done everything. You've reminded him he's human. That it's possible to have power and heart at the same time. That was our biggest fear, you know. The families. That he'd become his father, cold, calculating, nothing but the business. But you, she smiled. You saved him from that. The confrontation with Dante came 8 months after the wedding. It happened in the very gallery where Nia had pulled the fire alarm, where everything had started. Dante had been making moves in the business, subtle at first, then increasingly bold. Trying to undermine Lorenzo's authority, questioning his decisions, suggesting he'd gone soft. You wanted to see me? Lorenzo said calmly when he found Dante waiting there. Cousin. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk about the future. The future is fine. Is it? You've spent the last year playing house with your wife while the business is stronger than ever. Profit is up. Territory is secure. Partnerships are solid. What exactly is your concern? My concern, Dante said slowly, is that you've forgotten who you are. What you are. You've let sentiment make you weak. Lorenzo laughed, and it was not a kind sound. You think loving my wife makes me weak? I think it makes you predictable. Vulnerable. Then you don't understand love at all. Lorenzo moved closer. Caring about Nia doesn't make me weak. It makes me focused. Motivated. Clear about what matters. And what matters is building something that lasts. Not just power for power's sake, but a legacy. A family. A life. Sentiment, Dante spat. Purpose, Lorenzo corrected. And if you can't see the difference, then you'll never be fit to lead this family. We'll see about that. The threat was clear. But before Dante could move, Nia stepped out of the shadows where she'd been listening. You know what I've learned, she said conversationally. In this family, in this world? That real strength isn't about being the hardest or the coldest. It's about knowing what you're willing to fight for. What you're willing to protect. She moved to stand beside Lorenzo. You see Lorenzo's love for me as weakness. I see it as the reason he's smarter, sharper, more dangerous than he's ever been. Because now he's not just protecting an empire. He's protecting us. And that makes him unstoppable. Dante looked between them, and Nia saw the moment he realized he'd lost before the fight even began. You're finished here, Lorenzo said quietly. In New York, in the family business. Take your supporters and go. Because if you stay, his voice went cold. If you stay and threaten what's mine again, I will end you. And I'll do it with a clear conscience, because I know exactly what I'm protecting now. Dante left that night and never came back. The East Garden had become Nia's favorite place. She sat there now, watching the sunset turn the sky pink and gold, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. Their daughter, because of course they were having a girl, because life had a sense of poetry, kicked gently, as if reminding Nia she was there. Talking to yourself? Lorenzo asked, coming up behind her. Talking to her. Telling her about the garden, about the fountain, about how this is where her father proposed. He sat beside her, pulled her against his side. What else are you telling her? That she's going to be so loved. That she'll grow up in a house that's learning to be warm, not just powerful. That she'll have a father who plays piano and reads poetry, and a mother who still pulls fire alarms when necessary. Lorenzo laughed, the sound warm and free in ways it never used to be. Are you happy? Ridiculously so. She turned to look at him. Are you? I didn't think I was capable of this much happiness. Didn't think I deserved it. He kissed her temple. You proved me wrong about a lot of things. Like what? Like love being weakness. Like silence being safer than sound. Like I had to be what my father wanted instead of what my mother hoped. He placed his hand over hers on her belly. Like I couldn't build something good in a world that's often bad. You're doing exactly that. We're doing exactly that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting, painting the garden in shades of purple and blue. In the house behind them, preparations were being made for a family dinner. But not the old kind, this was the new tradition Nia had started, where family meant more than blood and business. Where Maria from the kitchen sat at the table alongside Santiago cousins. Where laughter was as important as power. Do you ever think about that first day? Nia asked. When I said good morning and you walked away? All the time. Lorenzo's voice was soft. I think about how close I came to never knowing you. To letting fear keep me silent forever. To missing this. We would have found each other eventually. Maybe. But I'm glad it was then. Glad it was you pulling that fire alarm. Glad it was you refusing to run. Glad it was you who saw past the marble to the man. The man is pretty great. He tries. Lorenzo turned her face toward his. I love you, Nia Santiago. Today and tomorrow and all the days after that. I love you too, she whispered. My silent man who learned to speak. And in the garden where everything had changed, where silence had broken into sound and walls had crumbled into trust, they kissed as the stars came out overhead. In the house, someone started playing piano, one of the younger cousins, practicing. In the kitchen, Maria hummed an old gospel song that made Lorenzo's grandmother smile with memory. In the study, Gabriella reviewed contracts that would fund new charities, new purposes, new ways of using power for good. And in the garden, two people who'd found each other across silence held tight to what they'd built, not just love, but a life. Not just survival, but purpose. Not just power, but heart. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and hopeful, and theirs. And that was everything. If you enjoyed this story of love finding its way through silence into sound, of walls crumbling and hearts learning to be brave, remember, the most powerful love isn't the loudest. Sometimes it's the kind that starts with a whisper and grows into a truth that can't be silenced. May you find the courage to pull the fire alarm when it matters. May you learn to see past the marble to the person underneath. And may you build something beautiful in whatever world you find yourself in.